They called him the Devil of the East Side, and tonight the devil was about to remind everyone why. Subscribe for more stories. Sit back and enjoy this one. Comments where you were watching from. Alessandro Benedetti didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to make threats or show weapons. All he had to do was stand up slowly from his chair, and the entire grand ballroom of the Whitmore estate fell into the kind of silence that comes before someone dies. 200 of the city's most powerful people froze like statues. Champagne glasses trembled in manicured hands. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the orchestra in the corner stopped playing, their instruments falling silent as if the music itself was afraid. Because when Alessandro Benedetti stood up at a social gathering, someone was about to pay a price. His dark eyes were fixed on one man across the room, Giovanni Torino, whose hand was wrapped around the waist of a woman in an emerald dress. The woman stood perfectly still, but her green eyes weren't filled with the terror that Giovanni had expected. Instead, they held something that made Alessandro's blood burn with a dangerous mixture of rage and desire. "Remove your hand," Alessandro's voice cut across the silent ballroom, each word dropping like stones into still water, "before I remove it for you." But this moment had been building all evening, and it started when the most dangerous man in the city first laid eyes on the most intriguing woman he had ever seen. 3 hours earlier, Natalia Rosewood had stepped out of her black sedan and gazed up at the Whitmore estate, her heart racing with anticipation. She smoothed her emerald silk dress and checked her reflection one last time, knowing that tonight would change everything. For weeks, she had been planning this moment. Her successful interior design business had become predictable, boring. She craved something more, something that would make her feel truly alive. And Alessandro Benedetti represented the most beautiful danger she could imagine. She had first seen his photograph in a carefully worded newspaper article about business acquisitions in the city. The reporter had been cautious, but Natalia could read between the lines. Alessandro wasn't just any businessman. He was the man who controlled the shadows, who made kings and destroyed empires with a single word. He was everything her safe, predictable life wasn't. Tonight, she would finally see the legend in person. The ballroom was magnificent, crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and the city's elite dressed in their finest. Natalia accepted champagne and began to mingle, playing the part of the refined designer perfectly. But her eyes constantly searched the crowd for one man. Then she found him. Alessandro sat at a corner table, partially hidden in shadow, but his presence dominated the entire room. He was more commanding than any photograph could capture. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see into people's souls. His expensive black suit fit him like armor, and even from across the room, Natalia could feel the dangerous energy that made grown men step aside when he walked past. What shocked her was that he was already watching her. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and Natalia felt her world tilt. There was something predatory in his gaze, something that made her feel like a deer who had wandered into a wolf's territory. But instead of fear, she felt a thrill that made her skin burn. She had come here seeking danger, and she had found the most dangerous man alive. For the next hour, they played an intricate game. Natalia moved through the crowd, engaging in polite conversation about art and design, but Alessandro's eyes tracked her every movement. When she glanced in his direction, he didn't look away. Instead, he studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, as if he could see through her refined facade to the wild hunger beneath. She was examining a Renaissance painting near the auction display when she sensed someone approaching, but it wasn't the man she had been hoping for. "Exquisite piece, isn't it?" the voice said, smooth but carried an undertone that made Natalia's skin crawl. She turned to find a man with slicked-back hair and cold, calculating eyes standing too close. "Though not nearly as exquisite as you." "Thank you," Natalia replied politely, trying to step away, but the man moved to block her path. "Giovanni Torino," he said, his smile sharp and predatory. "And you are far too beautiful to be standing here alone." From across the room, Alessandro's hands slowly clenched into fists as he watched Giovanni circle Natalia like a vulture. He'd been observing her all evening, fascinated by everything about her. She wasn't like the other women at these events. There was something different, something that called to the darkest parts of his nature. She moved with confidence, but carried secrets in her eyes. She was elegant yet wild, refined yet dangerous. And now Giovanni was touching what Alessandro had already claimed as his. "I'm actually enjoying the art," Natalia said, her voice steady despite the way Giovanni's presence made her uncomfortable. "Art is meant to be possessed, not just admired, just like beautiful women." As soon as his fingers dug into her silk dress, Natalia felt revulsion wash over her. This wasn't the thrilling danger she had been seeking. This was something ugly and violent. But before she could react, she heard the scrape of a chair across marble. The ballroom fell into deathly silence. Alessandro rose slowly, his movement deliberate and terrifying. Every person in the room seemed to stop breathing as his dark eyes fixed on Giovanni's hand wrapped around Natalia's waist. The very air seemed to grow heavy with the promise of violence. "Remove your hand," Alessandro's voice cut across the silent ballroom, each word dropping like stones into still water, "before I remove it for you." But this moment had been building all evening, and it started when the most dangerous man in the city first laid eyes on the most intriguing woman he had ever seen. But in that moment, as 200 people watched in frozen terror, Natalia did something that surprised everyone, including the devil himself. Instead of cowering, she turned her head and looked directly at Alessandro, her green eyes blazing, not with fear, but with something that looked like dangerously recognition, as if she had been waiting for him all her life.
The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Giovanni's grip on Natalia's waist tightened, but she could feel the tremor in his fingers now. Everyone in the ballroom knew what Alessandro Benedetti was capable of, and Giovanni had just crossed a line that men didn't come back from. But what no one knew was that this moment had been orchestrated long before any of them had stepped foot in the Whitmore estate. 2 weeks earlier, Natalia had sat in her downtown office staring at a manila folder that contained everything she could find about Alessandro Benedetti. Newspaper clippings, bluey photographs, whispered rumors from her more connected clients. The man was a ghost who cast shadows across the entire city. She had always been drawn to dangerous things. As a child, she climbed the highest trees, swam in the deepest parts of the lake, and sought out every thrill that made her parents worry. But adult life had tamed her, wrapped her in the safe cocoon of success and respectability. Until she heard about him, Alessandro Benedetti, the man who controlled everything from the shadows, the king of a world she had never seen but desperately wanted to enter. So she had done her research. She learned about his legitimate businesses, his charity appearances, his carefully maintained public facade. And she had planned her approach with the precision of a military operation. Tonight was supposed to be her first glimpse into his world. She hadn't expected to become the center of a deadly confrontation. Alessandro took a step forward, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. His men, who had been scattered throughout the ballroom disguised as guests, began to move with subtle precision. Franco, his right-hand man, appeared near the main entrance. Two others positioned themselves by the exits. They moved like shadows, and most of the guests didn't even notice the trap closing around Giovanni. But Alessandro's eyes never left Natalia's face. There was something about her that didn't fit. Most women would be terrified, crying, begging for help. But she stood perfectly still, her green eyes locked on his with an intensity that made his chest tighten. She wasn't just unafraid, she was fascinated. "You seem to have forgotten where you are, Giovanni," Alessandro said, his voice carrying easily across the silent ballroom. "This is a civilized gathering. Perhaps you should remember how to behave like a civilized man." Giovanni's laugh was forced, nervous. "Come now, Alessandro, I'm simply admiring the local beauty. Surely you don't object to a man appreciating art." "I object," Alessandro replied, taking another step closer, "to animals putting their hands on things that don't belong to them." The words sent a shiver through Natalia that had nothing to do with fear. The possessiveness in his voice, the way he spoke about her as if she were already his, it should have offended her. Instead, it ignited something dark and hungry in her chest. Mrs. Catherine Whitmore, the evening's hostess, appeared at Alessandro's side, her face pale with worry. "Gentlemen, please, this is a charity event. Perhaps we could resolve this misunderstanding quietly." Alessandro's smile was cold as winter. "There's no misunderstanding, Catherine. Mr. Torino was just leaving." But Giovanni wasn't ready to back down. His pride had been wounded in front of the city's elite, and his grip on Natalia became painful. "I don't think the lady has expressed her preference yet. Perhaps she enjoys the company of real men, not ghosts who hide in boardrooms." That was his mistake. Alessandro's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around him. The temperature seemed to drop, and even the bravest guests began edging toward the exits. When Alessandro Benedetti went completely still like that, people died. Natalia. Her name on his lips was like a caress and a command. "Come here." She should have been terrified. Giovanni's hand was still on her waist, his fingers digging into her ribs hard enough to bruise. Two of the most dangerous men in the city were facing off over her like she was a prize to be won. The smart thing would be to run, to get as far away from this world as possible. Instead, she looked directly into Alessandro's dark eyes and said, "Let me go, Giovanni." Her voice was steady, clear, and carried across the silent ballroom. But it wasn't a plea, it was an order. Giovanni's eyes widened in surprise. He had expected her to cower, to beg, to play the helpless victim, but there was steel in her voice that caught him off guard. "I don't think you understand the situation, sweetheart. You're coming with me." That's when Natalia smiled. It was a small smile, barely a curve of her lips, but it was filled with something that made Giovanni's blood run cold. Because it wasn't the smile of a victim, it was the smile of a predator who had been underestimated. "No," she said simply, "I'm not." And then she did something that shocked everyone in the ballroom, including Alessandro himself. She drove her elbow back into Giovanni's ribs with enough force to make him grunt and loosen his grip. In the same fluid movement, she stepped away from him and walked directly towards Alessandro, her emerald dress flowing around her like liquid fire. The crowd gasped, Giovanni cursed, but Alessandro's eyes never left Natalia's face, as she approached him with the confidence of a queen claiming her throne. When she reached him, she didn't stop. She stepped close enough that he could smell her perfume, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, close enough that when she spoke, only he could hear her words. "I've been looking for you," she whispered. And in that moment, Alessandro Benedetti, the man who controlled an empire, who had never been surprised by anything in his adult life, felt his world shift on its axis. Because he realized that this beautiful, dangerous woman hadn't stumbled into his world by accident. She had come looking for him. Alessandro's eyes darkened as Natalia's whispered confession hung in the air between them. The ballroom around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them locked in a moment that felt both inevitable and impossible. "Have you now?" His voice was low, dangerous, meant only for her ears. "And what exactly did you think you would find?" Before Natalia could answer, Giovanni's voice cut through their private moment like a blade. "How touching! The Ice King has found himself a pet." Alessandro's jaw tightened, but he didn't take his eyes off Natalia. There was something in her gaze that fascinated him, a hunger that matched his own, a darkness that called to the deepest parts of his nature. She wasn't just another socialite playing with fire. She was something else entirely. "You should leave," he told her quietly. "This isn't a world for someone like you." Natalia's smile was sharp as broken glass. "You don't know anything about what kind of person I am." She was right, and that realization sent a jolt through Alessandro's carefully controlled world. He made it his business to know everything about everyone who entered his orbit. But this woman, this beautiful, fearless woman who had walked straight into danger and seemed to thrive in it, was a complete mystery. "Then enlighten me," he said. But before she could respond, Giovanni made his move. "Enough of this romantic nonsense," he snarled, pulling a gun from inside his jacket. The crowd screamed and scattered, but there was nowhere to run. Giovanni's men had positioned themselves at the exits, trapping everyone inside. "You want her so badly, Alessandro? Let's see how much she's worth to you." The weapon was pointed directly at Natalia's head. Alessandro's blood turned to ice, but his expression remained perfectly calm. This was the moment that separated the living from the dead in his world, the ability to think clearly when everything was falling apart. "Interesting choice, Giovanni," he said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. "Threatening an innocent woman at a charity gala. Very classy." "Innocent?" Giovanni laughed, but there was hysteria in the sound. "Look at her, Alessandro. Look at how she's standing there. Does she look innocent to you?" Alessandro did look at her, and what he saw made his chest tighten with something between admiration and concern. Natalia wasn't cowering or crying or begging for her life. She was standing perfectly still, her green eyes fixed on Giovanni with the kind of cold calculation that Alessandro recognized in himself. She wasn't afraid. She was planning. "You're making a mistake," he said, taking a careful step forward. "Put the gun down, and we can discuss this like civilized men." "Civilized?" Giovanni's voice cracked. "You destroyed my brother. You took everything from my family, and now you think you can just take whatever you want?" The pieces clicked into place in Alessandro's mind. Giovanni's brother had made his choice. Giovanni had made it personal. "Your brother made his choice," Alessandro said, "just like you're making yours now." "Yes, I am." Giovanni's finger tightened on the trigger. "And my choice is to take something precious from you before I kill you." That's when Natalia moved. She spun toward Giovanni with fluid grace, her hand shooting out to grab his wrist. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the enclosed space, but the bullet went wide, shattering a crystal chandelier that crashed to the floor in a shower of sparkling fragments. In the chaos that followed, Alessandro moved like lightning. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, his hand closing around Giovanni's throat with crushing force. The gun clattered to the floor as Giovanni gasped for air, but Alessandro's attention was split between his enemy and the woman who had just saved both their lives with her quick thinking. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice rough with adrenaline and something else, something that felt dangerously like admiration. Natalia straightened her dress calmly, as if she hadn't just disarmed a man twice her size. "You don't know what kind of person I am." Around them, the ballroom was in chaos. Guests were screaming and running for the exits, security guards were shouting into their radios, and Mrs. Whitmore was having what appeared to be a nervous breakdown near the champagne fountain. But Alessandro only had eyes on the woman in the emerald dress who had just turned his world upside down. "Franco," he called, without looking away from Natalia. His right-hand man appeared instantly at his side. "Take care of Mr. Torino. Make sure he understands that his business in this city is finished." Franco nodded and hauled the gasping Giovanni away, but not before Giovanni managed to rasp out one final threat. "This isn't over, Alessandro. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into with her." The words sent a chill down Alessandro's spine, but not because he was afraid of Giovanni's threats. It was because of the way Natalia's eyes flickered when Giovanni spoke, as if she knew exactly what he meant. When they were finally alone, or as alone as they could be in a ballroom full of panicking socialites, Alessandro stepped closer to her. "We need to talk," he said. "Yes," she agreed, her voice steady, despite everything that had just happened. "We do." "Not here." He glanced around at the chaos surrounding them. "Somewhere private." Natalia tilted her head, studying him with those penetrating green eyes. "Are you asking me to leave with you?" "I'm telling you you're leaving with me," he corrected, his voice carrying the authority of a man who is used to be obeyed. "The question is whether you're going to fight me on it." Her smile was slow and dangerous. "I wouldn't dream of it." And as Alessandro led her toward the exit, his hand possessively placed on the small of her back, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap of his own making, because Natalia Rosewood was definitely not what she seemed. Alessandro's black Bentley cut through the city streets like a predator stalking its prey. The leather interior was silent, except for the soft purr of the engine and the tension crackling between its 2 occupants. Natalia sat beside him, her emerald dress a splash of color against the dark seats, her hands folded calmly in her lap, as if she rode with dangerous men every night. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice steady. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption," Alessandro replied, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. But he was acutely aware of every breath she took, every small movement she made. The woman beside him was a puzzle he couldn't solve, and that both intrigued and unsettled him. "You're not afraid," he observed. It wasn't a question. Natalia turned to look at him, studying his profile in the dim light from the dashboard. "Should I be? Most people are." "I'm not most people." Alessandro's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "No, you're not. The question is, what exactly are you?" Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. Franco's name appeared on the screen, and Alessandro answered through the car's speaker system. "It's done." Franco's voice filled the car. "Torino won't be a problem anymore. But boss, there's something you need to know." Alessandro glanced at Natalia, who was listening with the same calm expression she'd worn all evening. "What is it?" "I did some digging on our friend Giovanni. Turns out he's been asking questions about Miss Rosewood for the past 2 weeks. He knew she was going to be at the gala tonight." The car swerved slightly as Alessandro's attention snapped to Natalia. Her face remained perfectly composed, but he caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "How did he know that?" Alessandro asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. But boss, there's more. Miss Rosewood's background. It's clean, too clean, like someone scrubbed it. Alessandro pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to Natalia fully. In the dim light, she looked like a beautiful statue, perfect and untouchable. "Franco, I'll call you back," he said, ending the call. The silence in the car was deafening. "Well," Alessandro's voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. "Are you going to tell me who you really are, or do I need to find out the hard way?" Natalia met his gaze without flinching. "What do you want to know?" "Everything, starting with why Giovanni Torino was expecting you tonight." She was quiet for a long moment, and Alessandro could see her weighing her options. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, harder, more calculating. "Because I told him I would be there." The admission hit Alessandro like a physical blow. "You what?" "I contacted Giovanni 3 days ago. I told him I had information about you that he might find interesting. I arranged to meet him at the Gala." Alessandro's hand moved to the gun concealed beneath his jacket, but Natalia didn't even flinch. If anything, her eyes seemed to brighten with excitement. "You're working with him," Alessandro said, his voice deadly calm. "No," her response was immediate and firm. "I was using him." "For what?" Natalia's smile was sharp as a blade. "To get close to you." The admission hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Alessandro stared at her, trying to process what she was telling him. This woman, this beautiful, mysterious woman who had walked into his world and turned it upside down, had orchestrated everything. "Why?" The word came out rougher than he intended. "Because I needed to know if the stories about you were true." "What stories?" Natalia leaned closer, and Alessandro caught her scent, something expensive and intoxicating that made his head spin. "That you're the most dangerous man in the city, that you control everything from the shadows, that you're completely untouchable. And what's your conclusion?" Her hand moved to rest on his thigh, and Alessandro felt his control slip another notch. "I think the stories don't do you justice." Alessandro grabbed her wrist, his grip firm but not painful. "You're playing a very dangerous game." "I know." Her voice was breathless now, and Alessandro could see the pulse racing in her throat. "You could be killed tonight." "But I wasn't. You protected me." "I don't even know you." Natalia's free hand moved to touch his face, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "Yes, you do. You recognized me the moment you saw me, just like I recognized you. We're the same. We're both predators pretending to be civilized." Alessandro's control snapped. He pulled her against him, his mouth crashing down on hers in a kiss that was more possession than passion. She responded immediately, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal hunger. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This is insane," Alessandro said against her lips. "Yes," she agreed, "completely insane. You could destroy me, or I could destroy you." Alessandro pulled back to look at her, seeing his own hunger reflected in her green eyes. "What do you want from me?" Natalia's smile was pure temptation. "Everything." Before Alessandro could respond, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message from an unknown number. "She's not who you think she is. Check her real name. A friend." Alessandro showed Natalia the message, watching her face carefully. For the first time all evening, I saw genuine surprise in her eyes. "Someone doesn't want us together," she said quietly. "It seems that way," Alessandro said, starting the car again. "But they're too late." As they drove deeper into the night, neither of them noticed the black sedan following at a distance, or the telephoto lens capturing their every move. The game was just beginning. Alessandro's penthouse overlooked the city like a throne room overlooking a kingdom. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glittering lights below, while the interior was all dark wood, leather, and shadows, a perfect reflection of the man who lived there. Natalia moved through the space with the confidence of someone who belonged, her emerald dress a splash of color against the masculine decor. She paused at the bar, running her fingers along the crystal decanters as if she were cataloging everything she saw. "Impressive," she said, not turning around. "Very fitting for a king." Alessandro watched her from across the room, his jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up. Even in his own space, he felt off balance around her. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who would be intimidated by all this." He gestured to the opulent surroundings. "Someone who would ask questions about what I do, how I afford it." Natalia finally turned to face him, and her smile was knowing. "I already know what you do, Alessandro. I told you. I've been researching you." "For how long?" 6 months. The admission hit him like a physical blow. 6 months? She moved closer, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "I first heard about you at a gallery opening. 2 men were discussing a business deal that had gone wrong, and one of them mentioned your name. The way he said it, with fear and respect, made me curious." Alessandro's jaw tightened. "So you decided to what? Study me like a science project?" "I decided to find out if you were worth the risk." "What risk?" Natalia stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "The risk of falling for someone who could destroy me." Before Alessandro could respond, his phone rang. Franco's name appeared on the screen, and Alessandro almost ignored it, but something in his gut told him this was important. "What is it?" he answered curtly. "Boss, we have a problem. I found out who sent that text message." Alessandro put the phone on speaker, his eyes never leaving Natalia's face. "Who?" "Detective Sarah Chen. She's been running an undercover operation, trying to get close to your organization. And, boss, Miss Rosewood's real name isn't Natalia Rosewood." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Alessandro watched Natalia's face carefully, but she didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked relieved. "What's her real name?" Alessandro asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Natalia Romano. She's the daughter of Vincent Romano." Alessandro's blood turned to ice. Vincent Romano had been his mentor, the man who had taught him everything about power, control, and survival in their world. Vincent had also been killed 5 years ago by a rival family who had wanted to send a message. "That's impossible," Alessandro said. "Vincent never had children." Natalia's laugh was soft and bitter. "Vincent never acknowledged having children. There's a difference." Alessandro stared at her, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. "You're his daughter." "His bastard daughter," she corrected, "the product of an affair he had with my mother when I was conceived. He paid for my education, my apartment, my business, all through intermediaries. I never met him face to face until the day before he died." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to want me for who I am, not because of who my father was." Alessandro's mind was racing. Vincent Romano had been like a father to him, the closest thing to family he'd ever had. And now Vincent's daughter was standing in his living room, looking at him with eyes that held the same intelligence and ruthlessness that Vincent had possessed. "Franco," Alessandro said into the phone, "what else do you know about Detective Chen's operation?" "She's been tracking both you and Miss Romano for months. Apparently, she thinks Miss Romano is trying to take over her father's old territory, and she's using you to do it." Natalia's eyes flashed with anger. "That's ridiculous. I don't want my father's territory. I want something else entirely." "What?" Alessandro asked. Before she could answer, the lights in the penthouse went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow.
Alessandro immediately moved to the window, his trained eyes scanning the street below. 3 black SUVs were parked outside his building, and men in tactical gear were moving toward the entrance. "We have company," he said grimly. Natalia moved to stand beside him, and Alessandro was struck by how calm she remained. "Police? Worse, those are Giovanni's men." "I thought Franco took care of Giovanni." "Apparently not well enough." Alessandro moved to a hidden panel in the wall, revealing an arsenal of weapons. He selected a pistol and checked the clip. "There's a safe room behind the bookshelf. You'll be protected there." "I'm not hiding." Alessandro stared at her. "This isn't a game, Natalia. These men will kill you without hesitation." "Then we'd better make sure they don't get the chance." She moved to the bar and pressed something underneath the marble surface. A hidden compartment opened, revealing a sleek black pistol. She checked it with the practiced ease of someone who knew weapons intimately. Alessandro's eyes widened. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My father might not have acknowledged me publicly, but he made sure I could protect myself." Her smile was sharp and dangerous. "Did you really think Vincent Romano's daughter would be helpless?" The sound of the elevator arriving at their floor echoed through the penthouse. Alessandro counted at least 6 sets of footsteps moving toward his door. "They're here," he said. Natalia moved to stand back to back with him, her weapon raised. "Good. I was getting bored with all the talking." As the first explosion rocked the front door, Alessandro realized that everything he thought he knew about this woman was wrong. She wasn't just Vincent's daughter, she was Vincent's legacy, and that made her the most dangerous person he'd ever met. It also made her perfect for him.
The front door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and smoke. Alessandro counted 6 figures moving through the haze, their weapons raised and ready. But instead of the fear he expected to feel for Natalia's safety, he felt something else entirely. A dark thrill at seeing her in action. She moved like liquid death, rolling behind the marble bar as bullets shattered the crystal decanters above her head. Her return fire was precise, calculated, each shot finding its mark with the kind of accuracy that only came from years of training. "Vincent taught you well," Alessandro called out as he took cover behind a steel support beam. "He taught me to survive," Natalia replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Everything else I learned on my own." 2 of Giovanni's men tried to flank them from the left, but Alessandro was ready. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, his shots dropping both men before they could get close. But more were coming. He could hear footsteps on the stairs, voices shouting orders in the hallway. "How many men does Giovanni have?" Natalia asked, reloading with practiced efficiency. "Too many." Alessandro's mind was racing, calculating odds and escape routes. But not enough. That's when the lights came back on, and Alessandro saw something that made his blood run cold. Detective Chen was standing in the doorway, her badge visible on her tactical vest, her weapon trained on Natalia. "NYPD, drop your weapons!" But she wasn't looking at Giovanni's men. She was looking at Natalia with the kind of hatred that went beyond professional duty. "Well, well," Chen said, stepping over the bodies of Giovanni's men. "Natalia Romano, I've been looking for you for a very long time." Natalia didn't lower her weapon. "Detective Chen, I presume. You're the one who's been following me." "Following you, investigating you, building a case against you." Chen's voice was filled with venom. "Did you really think you could waltz back into the city and claim your father's empire without anyone noticing?" "I'm not claiming anything," Natalia said, calmly. "I'm an interior designer." Chen laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Interior designer? Is that what you call money laundering through high-end renovations? Is that what you call using your business as a front for arms dealing?" Alessandro's eyes snapped to Natalia. Arms dealing? That was news to him. "You have no proof of any of that," Natalia said, but Alessandro caught the slight tension in her voice. "Don't I?" Chen pulled out a tablet showing them surveillance photos. These are pictures of you meeting with known weapons dealers. These are bank records showing suspicious transfers through your business accounts. And this, she swiped to a new image, this is you at your father's funeral, swearing revenge on the people who killed him. The last image hit Alessandro like a physical blow. It showed Natalia standing over Vincent's grave, her face twisted with grief and rage, her lips moving in what looked like a vow. "You lied to me," Alessandro said, his voice deadly quiet. Natalia's eyes met his, and for the first time since he'd met her, he saw vulnerability there. "I never lied about my feelings for you." "But you lied about everything else?" "I had to. You wouldn't have understood." "Try me." Chen was watching their exchange with obvious satisfaction. "Oh, this is rich. The great Alessandro Benedetti, fooled by a woman with daddy issues." Alessandro's attention snapped back to the detective. "You're out of your jurisdiction, Chen, and you're interfering with my business." "My business is your business when it involves murder and mayhem in my city." "Then you should be arresting Giovanni's men, not us." Chen's smile was cold. "Giovanni's men are already dead. You killed them. Self-defense, of course, but it gives me the perfect opportunity to bring you both in." That's when Natalia made her move. She spun toward Chen with lightning speed, her weapon trained on the detective's chest. "I don't think so." "You're going to shoot a cop?" Chen asked, but Alessandro could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "I'm going to shoot someone who's been harassing me for months without cause, someone who's been interfering with my legitimate business, someone who clearly has a personal vendetta that has nothing to do with justice." Chen's face flushed red. "Personal vendetta? Your father destroyed my family. He killed my brother." The truth came out in a rush of pain and anger. Chen's brother had been an undercover cop who had gotten too close to Vincent's operation. Vincent had discovered his identity and eliminated the threat, just like he'd been trained to do. "Your father did what he had to do to protect his people," Natalia said, her voice softening slightly. "Just like you're doing now. But I'm not my father, detective. I'm not trying to rebuild his empire." "Then what are you trying to do?" Natalia glanced at Alessandro, and he saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten. "I'm trying to destroy it." The admission hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Alessandro stared at her, trying to process what she just said. "Destroy it?" he repeated. "Every connection, every alliance, every dirty deal my father ever made, I want it all burned to the ground." Her voice was fierce, passionate. "He abandoned me, Alessandro. He left me to grow up alone while he built an empire on blood and fear. And when he finally acknowledged me, it was only to ask me to continue his legacy." "So you decided to end it instead?" "I decided to choose my own path. With you, if you'll have me." Alessandro felt something shift inside him. This woman, this beautiful, dangerous, complicated woman, had just offered him something he'd never had before. A choice, a chance to build something new instead of inheriting something old. But before he could answer, Chen raised her weapon again. "How touching, but you're both still under arrest." That's when the real shooting started. The gunshot echoed through the penthouse, but it wasn't Chen who fired. Franco stood in the doorway, smoke rising from his weapon as Detective Chen crumpled to the floor. Behind him, Alessandro could see more of his men securing the hallway, stepping over the bodies of Giovanni's remaining soldiers. "Sorry I'm late, boss," Franco said calmly. "Traffic was murder." Alessandro kept his weapon trained on Chen, who was clutching her shoulder and glaring up at them with undimmed hatred. "She's still alive." "Thought you might want to question her first," Franco replied. "Plus, killing cops brings too much heat." Natalia moved to Chen's side, kicking the detective's weapon away before kneeling down. "The shoulder wound isn't fatal, but you're going to need medical attention soon." Chen spat blood. "You think this changes anything? I have backup coming. The whole department knows where I am." "No, they don't," Franco said, pulling Chen's phone. You've been running an unauthorized investigation for months. Your captain thinks you're on vacation in Florida." The detective's face went pale as the reality of her situation sank in. Alessandro holstered his weapon and moved to the window, looking out at the city lights below. His mind was racing, processing everything that had happened, everything Natalia had revealed. When he turned back, she was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "So," he said quietly, "you want to destroy your father's empire?" "Yes. And you thought the best way to do that was to seduce me." Natalia stood slowly, her emerald dress torn and stained with smoke, but her dignity intact. "I thought the best way was to find someone strong enough to help me, someone who understood that world but wasn't corrupted by it." "You think I'm not corrupted?" Her smile was sad and knowing. "I think you're exactly as corrupted as you choose to be, just like me." Alessandra studied her face, looking for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was just another game in a world full of games. But all he saw was truth, raw, painful, and beautiful. "Your father saved my life once," he said finally. "When I was 19 and stupid enough to think I could take on the Castellano family alone. Vincent found me bleeding in an alley and nursed me back to health. He taught me everything I know about survival, about power, about control." "I know," Natalia said softly. "He talked about you, called you the son he never had." The words hit Alessandra like a physical blow. "He never told me about you." "Because he was ashamed of me, ashamed that he'd created something he couldn't control." Her voice grew stronger, more defiant. "He wanted me to be grateful for his money, his protection, his occasional attention. He wanted me to be content living in the shadows of his world. But you weren't." I was furious. The admission came out like a confession. Furious that he could love you like a son while treating me like a dirty secret. Furious that he built an empire on violence and expected me to be proud of it. Furious that when he finally acknowledged me, it was only to ask me to carry on his legacy of blood and fear. Alessandra moved closer to her, drawn by the passion in her voice, the fire in her eyes. "So you decided to burn it all down." "I decided to choose love over legacy." She reached out to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his skin. "Even though you barely knew me? I knew enough. I knew you were strong enough to survive without his empire. I knew you were smart enough to build something better. And I knew—" She hesitated, vulnerability flickering across her features. "I knew I was falling in love with you before we even met." The confession hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Alessandro felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd kept locked away for so long he'd forgotten it existed. "This is insane," he said, echoing his words from the car. "Yes," she agreed, "completely insane. You could have told me the truth from the beginning. Would you have believed me? Would you have trusted Vincent Romano's daughter if she'd walked up to you and said she wanted to destroy everything her father built?" Alessandro considered this, knowing she was right. He would have seen it as a trap, a test, another game in a world full of games. "What happens now?" he asked. Before Natalia could answer, Chen spoke up from the floor. "Now both of you go to prison. Even if you kill me, there are others who know about this investigation, others who won't stop until you're both behind bars." Alessandra looked down at the wounded detective, then at Franco, who was waiting for orders. A year ago, the solution would have been simple. Clean up the mess, eliminate the threats, continue business as usual. But Natalia had changed everything. "No more killing," he said finally. "We're done with that." Franco's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he nodded. "What do you want me to do with her?" Alessandro looked at Natalia, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. They were at a crossroads,
a moment where they could choose to repeat the patterns of the past or forge something entirely new. "We disappear," Natalia said quietly. "Both of us. Leave the city, leave this life, start over somewhere else." "And leave everything behind?" "Leave everything that doesn't matter behind." She stepped closer, her hand finding his. Alessandro felt the weight of his empire, his responsibilities, his carefully constructed world pressing down on him. Then he looked into Natalia's eyes and saw something he'd never had before, a future that wasn't built on fear and violence. "Franco," he said without looking away from her, "transfer everything to the legitimate businesses, shut down the rest, and make sure Detective Chen gets medical attention." "Boss? We're retiring." As sirens wailed in the distance and the city lights twinkled below, Alessandro Benedetti made the most dangerous choice of his life. He chose love over power. And for the first time in years, he felt truly free.